Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news. The Bloomberg Businessweek podcast with Massar and Tim Stenovec from Bloomberg Radio.
Well, the results of yesterday's election may have come to a surprise to quite a few people, but not to Ed Price. When he was with us back in October, he shared with us what he learned on his summer trip driving across the country. We're talking 8,500 miles, New York to San Francisco. He did that, the northern route through Yellowstone, and then back to New York through New Orleans. So he saw a lot of the country. And what he heard was a lot of complaints about prices, the economy, from a lot of people he spoke to. Also, Carol, there was not a Harris Walsh sign to be seen in the Rust Belt. So he called it for Trump a little bit ago.
Yeah, he absolutely did. And now he writes, things may get seriously weird. Ed Price is a former British trade official, now non-resident senior fellow at NYU, principal for geopolitical forecasting at the global intelligence and consulting firm Ergo. He has advised members of the European and British parliaments. He joins us right here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, back here on U.S. soil. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Carol. Only I'm not.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. Okay, the people have spoken. The people have spoken loudly. I'm just not sure if they've also spoken clearly. And by that, I mean, yes, obviously this is a massive endorsement of the Trump we know. Is it also a massive endorsement of the Trump to come? To what extent is this a cultural shift, a moment that is a pivot, right, in the zeitgeist, to use a fancy word? Or was it just about the economy? Was it really just that Kamala didn't quite bite with the voters? I'm not sure.
What do you mean when you write in a recent note that the people who identified Trump as a threat to democracy must now recognize him as the product of democracy, or they risk belittling the system?
Right. So I'm one of those people, right? I'm one of the people in public who not only called this, but I've been going around to anyone that will listen saying this guy is dangerous. Like, let's go and read some history. Like, he's clearly dangerous. And never mind me, right? There are very prominent, famous Americans who've been doing the same thing, like Liz Cheney, who's I'm a big fan of. What I mean by that is that now we have to shut up. Now we have to get behind this result. Because if we now turn around as a cohort of predominantly disgruntled Republicans and Democrats and say, hey, you know what? This is illegitimate. Or we go anywhere near suggesting that somehow it's not right, we are doing more or less exactly what Trump did on January 6th. Maybe not physically, but this is the real problem, I think.
You mean we made our choice, now we have to get behind it?
We collectively made our choice. We have to.
Ed, is this democracy at work or democracy broken? And here I am listening to your lovely, accent, and I'm thinking how, you're welcome, but how, go to Europe and you realize how civilization has been around and governments and countries and lots of different governments and rulings for a long, long time. We're a young nation.
Yes.
And so we're going to go through some really hard points. We have already.
Yes.
But I would guess that we're going to go through more.
Yes.
So what?
Well, I would say Europe is seeing a similar move toward what some would refer to as strongmen or at least populism that we've seen here in the U.S. over the last 8 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so fair. So,
fair.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand if this is part of the democratic process.
So here's the deep dark secret, guys. Okay, just huddle around. Right, we're not supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to be a republic, which is different. The original design was very mindful of populism. They wouldn't have called it that.
Yeah.
But the founders designed a constitution effectively to check a king, to keep a king in a box, because you needed some executive. We all know this, right? The Federalists, Jefferson, all the rest of it. As we've trended through our rightful progressive history, and we've sort of built this promise of 1776 into something real, we've also extended the franchise, extended this sense that, of human dignity, to the point that we are now a mass democracy. That is not what the founders wanted, exactly because sometimes people can choose. I'm just now looking at the ceiling, searching for words. Choose candidates that might be suboptimal in their belief regarding democracy. So this is why we're stuck, right? This is the paradox.
You know, there's this. I'm obsessed with this essay that was in the New York Times, and I sent it around to the team, and it says what we just went through wasn't an election; it was a hostage situation.
Oh my God.
Our major parties. It's written by, forgive me, everybody, Tyler Austin Harper, assistant professor of environmental studies at Bates. But he says our major parties represents the interests of streaming magnates, the arms industry, oil barons, Bitcoin ghouls, and big tobacco, often without even pretending to heed the needs of voters. A political system like this, like that, is fundamentally broken. We consistently talk about money and the amount of money in politics. We talked about how much money was spent, how much money was maybe spent by one billionaire.
Yes.
Do you agree?
No, I don't agree with that. For me, that sounds sort of Marxist around the edges, right? Just to say, right, America's a write-off, we're done. This is the line I'm trying to walk, okay? I'll be honest with you, I'm horrified. I woke up this morning, I felt like I was hungover or sick. That's probably a reaction a lot of people have had. I don't get it, right? But he is elected. We cannot now say the whole system is broken simply because there was a mass poll. I mean, the guy's going to win the popular vote. What we have to do is have better civics. I don't for the life of me know why we extend the First Amendment to Russian troll farms, for example. I mean, this is nuts, okay? So it's third parties as well, right, outside.
Right.
And here's something that sort of scared me. Apparently, the Russians were putting in bomb threats in parts of the country where it could have swung around, right? I mean, that's crazy.
It's not just about the presidential election. We are getting some breaking news, actually. Alyssa Slotkin, Democrat out of Michigan, has won the Senate race there. So the Democrats do hold that seat, Carol.
All right. So this is something we continue to watch in terms of the congressional makeup.
So, Ed, you said something really interesting, because I think you're feeling something that certainly I would imagine other Americans are feeling today. But at the same time, you had tens of millions of people. And again, it looks like the former president-elect, will win the popular vote this time around. First time in 2 decades Republicans have done that. It's pretty remarkable. They were obviously saw his economic message as incredibly appealing. But now the rubber meets the road. And I would imagine, I can't see the future, but he has to deliver on that promise. Can he do that?
Look, I mean, the U.S. economy is a powerful beast. It's outperformed my home country, for example. It makes money. It makes people richer, right? I don't think that's within the gift of economic policymakers or presidents per se. Will he deliver on that? Again, I'd be lying to you guys. How many times have we chatted and I've said, I don't know. Okay, I think he probably can if he puts certain bits and bobs in place. But on that, I mean, let's just say one more thing about this, if I may. The Democrats have messed up wildly. This is not good. And one of the thoughts I had this morning when I was looking in the mirror was, maybe I'm the deplorable, right? Maybe I'm the global elitist deplorable, because I've sort of been looking at my neighbors thinking, oh God, why would you vote for this guy? So if he does deliver, back to the core point, right? They were right and I was wrong.
So your net takeaway bottom line is the democratic process has happened.
Yes.
Get behind your president.
Up and until anything illegal happens. Now, this is also something that could go down. And I worry that in a gray area, if the new president does things that kind of tinker around the edges of the Constitution, it's not an outright attack, there will be many people in the system who don't quite know, like, which republic am I, loyal to here? The office that is telling me to do something that I think is a bit sketchy, or not, right? And so this could be a problem, right? I mean,
do we still have checks and balances?
For now, I don't know that the Supreme Court is balanced by design. If he has a full sweep, right? I can't believe I'm about to say this on air, honestly. The ultimate check and balance we have is the U.S. Army. Okay, the military, I have full faith and confidence that the oath that they take to the Constitution is our ultimate backstop. But look, I don't want to be alarmist. I said what I've said. He's won. Somebody somewhere in the Democratic Party is going to have to either resign or apologize, because this is not good for the Democratic Party at all.
Or he could be someone who gets into the office and realizes the kind of weight of that job and the importance of the U.S. economy in the global economy, and do good things for the U.S. I mean, yeah, like we don't know, right?
Or the market checks him.
Or the market, like I keep thinking the market, the financial markets are going to check it.
That's a good point. Capital markets do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And at some point, the way we're playing with debt, markets will warn us, and he may be in office when they do that, right? So,
yeah. So interesting. Lots to think about. Ed
Lots
Price.
to think about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our thanks to Ed Price, former British trade official, non-resident senior fellow over at NYU, joining us right here in our studio.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Got to say, we knew coming into this week it was going to be an interesting one with the presidential vote. But let's not forget, we've got a Fed decision happening in the same week. In fact, we get that decision tomorrow. Donald Trump's victory threatens to upend the U.S. economic outlook, alter the Fed's policy calculus in the months ahead, while renewing some questions about how fiercely he might pressure the U.S. central bank during his second term in the White House. So, yeah, there's a lot to think about here.
Our focus shifts to tomorrow's Fed decision. With us, we got Stephen Skancke. He's Chief Economic Advisor at the wealth advisor Keel Point. Steve, also a former U.S. Treasury and White House National Security Council staff member, serving in the Nixon, Ford, Carter, and Reagan administrations. He joins us from Mexico. Also here in the studio is Bloomberg News International Economics and Policy Correspondent Michael McKee. Mike, I do want to start with you and just get an idea from you about how the Fed and the members of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors might be taking into account a Trump victory versus a Harris victory. Does their meeting change today?
No, it doesn't change the meeting for today and tomorrow because they're dealing with the economy as it is now. The question is, what's the policy path going to be going forward in September? They said we were going to do 3 more rate cuts this year and 100 basis points next year. And they set out their markers for what they thought the economy would do in terms of unemployment and growth, et cetera. And now they're going to have to rethink all that. We don't know. It wasn't a certainty we'd get 3 this year because of the way unemployment, the jobs numbers and inflation numbers have come in since the September meeting. But the next year path is going to be interesting to see how they handle it, which we won't find out really until December. But because there's no way to put any kind of model on what the economy is going to do under a Trump plan, because Trump doesn't have a plan, he just has some talking points, the Fed is going to have to wait. And so we'll hear a lot of Jay Powell saying, we don't know.
Yeah, right. So got to wait until he actually does something, right? Steve, come on in on your view, how things have changed for the Fed or not as a result of the presidential election.
Well, I think a couple of things, and I certainly agree with what Mike said, but interest rates, higher Treasury yields will certainly help the Fed, and that's clearly a result of the expectation of higher fiscal stimulus and higher borrowing costs generally. So in the first sense, interest rates will be helping the Fed and giving them a little bit more ease as they continue to cut. And also, he's not going to do anything until after he's inaugurated. Sure, there's expectations, but the reality is there was a lot of commentary and proposals about raising tariffs and cutting a whole host of income taxes and a whole bunch of things. And if those things happen, that could have a negative impact, raising inflation by 1% from mid-2025 to mid-2026. And then the Fed has to deal with that. And at the same time, slowing down economic growth as a result of those same tariff increases. So that's got to be part of the Fed's thinking too.
I want to cut to the chase, guys. Let's go to the big question we know that's going to be at the press conference. Tim actually brought it up with Mike McKee when he walked in. I mean, is Jay Powell going to be asked a lot about the Fed's independence?
Oh, I thought you said the big question was going to be, where's Juan Soto going to sign now that it's MLB
That's
free agent
question
period?
number 2.
Of course, Jay Powell's going to be asked it. He's going to be asked it 6 ways from Sunday because he's not going to answer it. He's going to say our job is to focus on our dual mandate of inflation and maximum employment, and that's what we're going to do, and we will take the data as they come and make our decisions. Beyond that, I'm not sure how he would answer the questions because anything he said would probably upset the markets, which is the last thing that they want to do. So he's going to get asked about it. I don't know that we get a whole lot of response.
Steve, come on in here. How does he thread that needle? He's experienced what it's like to
He's
be
very
the Fed
experienced
chair.
about that.
Yeah, to be the Fed chair under President Trump, when President Trump spoke very publicly about actually wanting the Fed to lower rates.
Yeah, I think he'll just avoid the question as best he can, and continue to point out that, as he has in past press conferences, the Fed is not affected by the political environment. It doesn't pay attention to the elections. It sticks to its mandate, as Mike reiterated, but also as a practical matter. There really isn't any opportunity for President Trump to put his thumb on the Fed until after Jay Powell's term expires in 2026, and most likely when his term as chair expires, he'll retire, and which is a little bit before the end of his governorship term. But then President Trump would have to figure out who he thought he could pick, either from among the existing governors who might be more sympathetic to his points, and when there's an opening to appoint someone, who can he appoint? Because, the last time around, the Senate turned down several of his nominations to the Fed that they thought just weren't qualified.
God, Mike, are you even thinking about who might take over for Jay Powell?
Yes and no. No, in the sense that it's only been about 8 hours since the decision became
how the media
official.
cycle works.
But there have been names floated under a Trump administration, a Kevin Hassett or somebody like that people think could be a nominee. But as he was saying, there's Jay Powell's in the job till 2026,
right?
And while Powell has in the past talked about trying to fire him, he seems to have backed off of that a little bit, in part probably because he's been told he doesn't have the power to do that. It would end up in court. But we'll have to see. Far more interesting would be a question about what happens to Michael Barr, the vice chairman for supervision. When the Democrats took over, the vice chair for supervision at the time resigned, and when Powell took over, or when Trump took over, the vice chair for supervision resigned, and it becomes sort of their right to have their own regulator. But it's also not written anywhere that person has to do that. Now, what's going to be interesting is the Basel III endgame, the big regulatory package that the Treasury and Fed have been working on, that they're now going to repropose. They said they were going to do that after the first of the year. Well, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So one question maybe for Jay Powell tomorrow is where does this go?
Right.
He probably won't talk about whether Barr should resign, but what happens with bank regulation, because now you've got a deregulatory administration coming in.
So, right. Yes. That's why you see bank stocks, right, rallying in a big way.
Well, Steve, jump in on this, because you were former U.S. Treasury and National Security Staff Council member. What do you make of what Mike just said? The idea that Jay Powell is unclear where this goes from here.
Well, I think he'll be very careful about that because it's not clear that the vice chair for supervision would resign. I mean, he might, but once again, he's going to be very shrewd and very deft at just not getting drawn into that. Certainly not at this point. Maybe it'll come up at the January meeting. Well, certainly it'll come up at the January meeting. Maybe it'll come up at the December meeting. But Powell doesn't want to get caught up in something over which he really has no control, and at this point really doesn't make a difference. He would.
Yeah, no.
Go ahead.
No. Well, one thing I want to ask you guys is if, in some ways, the Fed, at least for right now, under Jay Powell, Steve, let me start with you. Is it kind of a checks and balance on Trump policy? Because if it truly is independent, and if he does inflation, if Trump creates policies that create inflation, the central bank's going to do what the central bank's going to do, so, and that will have repercussions. And in some ways, is that a check on some of his policies?
Well, it certainly is a check on some of his policies, but also just financial markets are a check on his policies.
That too.
We at some point reach, or markets reach the point where they just push back at Treasury borrowing and say no more. And then the question is, does the Fed buy that? But at the same time, when we have high fiscal stimulus, the counterweight to that is tighter monetary policy, which means higher interest rates. And Donald Trump said all along that he really thinks he should control the Fed and that they need to get interest rates down, and they need to get them down further than they are. And that's fine to say, but it's not likely that he's going to find a cooperative Fed on moving interest rates or policy in a direction that's opposite of their mandate. And also, financial markets are going to be right there with them.
Well, that's something I've been thinking about. Mike, let me just get you, on that last thought, 30, 40 seconds. Like, I do think about, is the Fed in some ways a gut check, if you will, because it does have some tools and it will react if there's inflationary pressures or a weakening economy.
And that's what would make Donald Trump mad if that came to pass. Now, we know that tariffs are supposed to be inflationary. They probably will be, but how much, we don't know, because we don't know what the tariff levels are going to be. Same with deportations. A lot of Trump policies could cause inflation or could cause the economy to stall and the Fed to make an interest rate decision, but we just don't know yet what that's going to be. I can point out that inflation break-evens, a 5-year break-even, rose the most today since 2020 in one day. So the markets are pricing in inflation, and the idea of inflation expectations becoming unmoored is always the since Halloween was last week, the boogeyman under the bed for the Fed.
Well said. Michael McKee, thank you so much. Off to Washington, D.C. and the Federal Bank for that decision tomorrow. And in fact, catch a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance, The Fed Decides. That's at 1:30 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Tesla shares, we are definitely seeing them soaring. I know Charlie's been talking about them. I'm just taking
more than 14% right now.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. This, as the car maker run by Elon Musk, will be a major beneficiary of Donald Trump's return to the White House. The Tesla CEO, no doubt about it, arguably the most prominent supporter of Republicans this election cycle, backing them with more than $130 million in spending and relentless messaging on X, his social media network. While Trump criticized electric vehicles throughout his campaign, he did soften his tone somewhat after Elon Musk's endorsement. Trump acknowledging Musk last night from West Palm Beach.
Let me tell you, we have a new star. A star is born, Elon. Now he is. Now he's an amazing guy. We were sitting together tonight. He spent 2 weeks in Philadelphia and different parts of Pennsylvania campaigning.
Well, there it is. Donald Trump last night, or early this morning, I should say, talking about Elon Musk and the help that he gave to the former president and now president-elect. Back with us to talk about the role of Elon in another Trump White House is Max Chafkin. He's Bloomberg Businessweek columnist, also a contributor to the Elon Inc. podcast. Max is here in the studio. Tesla shares just absolutely soaring today. What else does $130 million in spending get Elon and Tesla and SpaceX in a Trump White House?
I mean, just on Tesla, that 15% gain is going to add up to probably more than $15 billion of net worth for Elon Musk.
I was looking at that this morning.
And
it's like, compared to $130 million, that's a return on investment.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when all is said and done and we have all the filings, I would not be surprised if Elon Musk's contribution was closer to 200, if not even higher than that. But whatever it was, it's way less than the potential, it's a paper gain of, say, $15 billion. And really, that's the tip of the iceberg, because Tesla, although it is a highly regulated business, it does benefit from lots of government policy that could be impacted by a new presidency. It isn't the most direct impact. The most direct one is SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's giant defense contractor and rocket company. And SpaceX already has huge contracts from the federal government. Trump on the campaign trail talked a lot about the potential for more contracts. Talking about a Mars mission, which would likely feature SpaceX prominently and be worth billions, if not tens of billions of dollars. There's also potential government money for Starlink, Elon Musk's satellite internet company. Elon Musk has other businesses that could also benefit from this. The Boring Company, which is an infrastructure play. Neuralink, that's federally regulated. This is a guy who does business with government regulators in one way or another all the time. And so he arguably, I think from the point of view of the Trump campaign or Trump supporters, he understands it, but obviously he has a lot to gain.
How does this work, though? Like, I think about the training we all do as employees about conflicts of interest, and you can't have them. So, where are regulators on having a CEO of a publicly held company that has U.S. government contracts, has global government contracts, having possibly a job in the U.S. government, Secretary of Cost Cutting, perhaps? How does that work? How can it work? I mean, does he have to sell off his Tesla holdings to do this?
I think it's, so first of all, I think you should think about Elon Musk's influence in the White House to be at least partly informal rather than formal, because formal influence, I don't think we're talking about a Senate confirmed position. I think that would be very hard. I think he does not want to leave, give up control of any of his companies or even have to sell stock or even have to put stock in a trust. He wants to continue running his companies and also contribute to the White House. That's kind of how he has framed it. So, my guess is some sort of not in the government, but having some sort of advisory role. Trump did this a little bit in 2016. And I should also say, one thing we learned during that time is that, there are formal roles in the White House, and then there is probably the most important job, which is who is speaking to Donald Trump regularly. And that, I think we know Elon Musk is doing that regularly. He's clearly top of mind during that 25-minute or so victory speech. Elon Musk praise took up between 5 and 7 minutes. It was a substantial part of how Trump framed his candidacy and how he's thinking right now.
What have you learned just in the last 6 weeks about what Elon Musk's priorities are, given what he's posted on X, what he's talked about at rallies, and the influence that he would have on a second Trump administration?
Well, I think the priorities are the business priorities, probably first and foremost.
But he's talked about immigration a lot,
right?
too.
Yes, but I would say that Elon Musk has emerged. I think there were people, as Elon Musk started to sort of dip his toe into politics, thinking that he would be this would be like a normal business guy engaging politically, which is you write a check and you turn around and you're out of it, right? And I think Elon Musk has the intention of being a political player going forward. That is, there's people this morning where I was getting questions from friends and so on saying, well, what's stopping Trump from just turning around, taking Elon's money and not doing any of the stuff he wants, not giving SpaceX another contract? And the answer is, besides the fact that Elon Musk is a popular guy, that you could make the argument that Elon Musk's support was meaningful, perhaps even helping to push Donald Trump over the edge. But even if you leave that aside, Elon Musk is saying that he is going to be a major political donor in the midterms. That's what he said yesterday. So he has potentially, millions, tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars more money that he is planning on spending. He is going to be, as he said, the George Soros of the right, the main, the power broker, the business guy who can make or break your campaign.
So transactional, or he likes politics all of a sudden?
I think he's obviously interested in how he could benefit. Okay. And that is and so in that sense, yes, transactional. But I think you really need to look at this as a play for influence and for power that goes beyond just any one contract or anything like that.
There's no shortage of folks, and they've been all over cable news over the last 2 years, former Trump administration officials who felt burned by the former president and president-elect, who are now opposed to him within his people. The vice president, for example. What are the chances that Musk's relationship goes sour with Trump over the next couple of years?
I mean, I think just if you look at the personalities, these are two men who really like to occupy the kind of main role, the central role. It's hard to imagine them being able to hang out in a room together and defer to one another. That said, I think the reasons that brought them together will keep them together at least for some time. And you got to look at, we talked about the money, the political contributions to President-elect Trump, but we should be talking also about X, these kind of in-kind contributions. Elon Musk bought Twitter and now X, and he invested a lot of money. He's lost a lot of money on this thing, but he has really navigated it to a position of influence. He is arguably, in addition to being the richest guy, the most important conservative media mogul. And he's gonna he's gonna have a lot of influence over Trump over the next 4 years.
Do you think more important than Rupert Murdoch?
Yes, I think it's more important than Rupert Murdoch.
More important than Trump's own social media company?
I mean, I think we have to.
How does Trump say, wait, I want to put it on Trump Social or
Truth
whatever?
Social.
Truth Social, sorry.
Elon Musk was already arguably the most powerful person
Yeah.
in the world. And I think undoubtedly now you have to say
Yeah,
he's a candidate.
he is indeed. Now he's president-elect. Max Chafkin, thank you.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, 18 minutes, just under 18 minutes to go until we wrap up this trading day, Wednesday, November 6th. We've got equities just rolling over. I'm looking at the IMAP on the S&P 500 on the Bloomberg. So pie chart basically looking at major sectors in the S&P 500, a breakdown, a lot of green. So I think it's fairly safe to say a bit of a risk-on trade. Some are calling it a Trump trade today. But yeah, that's our setup here.
Hey, I think that's certainly fair to say. We're going to be talking a lot about stocks that are moving higher as a result of the Trump trade. I got a few.
Did you find some?
I found some. I got some good ones for you.
You always find some.
I got some good ones. Hey, let's see what Louis Navellier has to say about this. He's founder and CIO at Navellier Associates. He joins us from West Palm Beach, Florida. Louis, you are in West Palm Beach. It's where the president-elect Donald Trump delivered remarks to supporters early this morning. What's the vibe there?
Oh, well, they're all excited around here. I'm sure the membership at Mar-a-Lago is now $1 million. I don't even bother to ask, but it's Florida's a Trump country, so I think they're very excited. I think some people are starting to ask though. I don't think he got as many votes as he did last time. I know they haven't tabulated everything, so we're still trying to We're trying to figure that one out.
Yeah, I think
so that's the only.
Yeah, we're still waiting on the final tally, but. No question, and a lot will be said about this later, I imagine, but turnout was not even close to what it was, Carol, back in 2020.
On Election Day.
Yeah.
On Election Day in particular.
Yeah. No, but I mean overall turnout.
Oh, overall.
Overall turnout, like the number of ballots cast.
Oh, seriously?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize we were down that much.
It's remarkable.
So, Louis, I want to ask you, you have lived through, invested through, advised clients through many market cycles, many political cycles. What is this cycle that we may or may not be in as a result of a second Trump White House?
Well, it's every administration enters with optimism, and then usually we give the new president 4 to 5 months before the criticism mounts. So we'll see if Trump gets that luxury. I mean, if he controls the House, he probably will, but we don't know if he's going to control the House yet. But I think the main thing is
not every president comes in though with Elon Musk as a buddy. Does that matter to you? Do you think that will have an impact?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Elon can lift a lot of things, rockets and stocks. So we'll see what he can do for the economy. But obviously, Elon's going to be on the government side, trying to pare the government down and save money. But I think the main thing is that we have almost 3% GDP growth just on services. So if Trump can get the manufacturing sector going again, maybe we can push 4% GDP growth. And then if we can get peace in the world by getting rid of all these wars, then maybe we'll get a peace dividend like Bill Clinton had.
Can I ask you, do we want to be a manufacturing economy? I thought, we wanted to find cheaper places to manufacture. Americans benefited big time because of that. And I thought we wanted to play as an economy. China wants to play on a higher level, higher tier. They don't want to be the manufacturer to the world. And we see that increasingly, moving out. Do we want to? What are the benefits for the United States specifically of having a bigger, broader U.S. manufacturing economy?
We almost have to be a manufacturing economy because we have the cheapest energy. So we have this glut of natural gas. Obviously, natural gas was a big election issue. That really was the issue in Pennsylvania. And now we can throttle up and put up some natural gas turbines to double the utility grid.
But why is it good for the U.S. to have a bigger manufacturing economy? As we have been talking about, this, right? Like we've been a service-led economy for a long time. But why is it what's the economic benefit? I understand some of the national security benefits, but what's the economic benefit to being a manufacturing economy?
Well, it's good for the Midwestern states, period. And they swung the election. So that blue wall was all manufacturing states. But in all seriousness, I'm keenly aware that, our entire air conditioning industry is now in Monterrey, Mexico. John Deere keeps moving production to Monterrey, Mexico, and keep having layoffs. Ford has more domestic employees than GM does because GM is all around the world. And so the question is, can we bring more of that back to America? And obviously that's the tariff argument. But right now you can make anything in Monterrey, Mexico, and it comes right across with via NAFTA. And we'll see what happens. BYD is obviously going to be building a plant down there. And Trump wants to put tariffs on those vehicles, so we'll see what happens. So we're going to have some trade wars, and if everybody has free trade and fair trade, there won't be tariffs, but there are going to be because the other side always has them. And so that's the first thing, and then, of course the most brutal tariffs will probably be on China. Now, our buddy from Counter Fitzgerald, Howard, is running around reminding. Yeah, Howard is running around reminding everybody that the U.S., when they had tariffs for income taxes, hinting that if we have enough tariffs, the income tax might diminish somewhat. I don't think that's true at all, but it's an interesting theory.
Do you think that the middle class will end up paying the brunt of those tariffs?
Yeah. Is everything going to go up?
No.
Why not?
The U.S. is an incredibly productive, efficient economy. Our efficiency is unbelievable. So we'll continue to make productivity gains. I mean, just go to a Costco and look how efficient that is. And shopping online is more efficient than going to a store. And we're just amazingly efficient.
But somebody has to pay for the tariffs, right? If a company is paying more to import, then it's either going to hit
margins,
their bottom line.
Right.
So then we'll see that in earnings, or they'll pass along that cost to consumers. It's one or the other.
Well, the only war I've seen Trump threaten is with the German auto industry, because I believe our tariffs are 10 to 25% depending on what we export, and then we only tax them 2.5%. So that might be the first battlefield. Olaf Scholz is in trouble as a leader over there, and they're about to shut down manufacturing plants over there. So Trump says, "Hey, just move them over here. We got cheap energy, we got abundant labor. Let's go." So I think it has to evolve, and I don't think we should overreact because it's not being enacted yet.
Are you buying any of the Trump trade today? Just got about 30 seconds here.
Not really. I noticed it's a huge small cap rally. It's ridiculous what the small caps are doing. We're going to have to back and fill. I think the biggest issue is the Fed can't cut beyond tomorrow because market rates have gone up. Last I looked, over 80 basis points in the last 6 weeks on the 10-year.
Yeah.
So the Fed will clarify that tomorrow, and Jerome Powell will too.
Yes, indeed. All right, Louis Navellier, thank you so much. Founder and CIO at Navellier Associates, joining us from West Palm Beach, Florida on this Wednesday.
This is the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.